If you stay in your bed and close your eyes, you'll probably be fine. But if you ever look around you, you stand a chance of falling upon something devilishly mysterious or totally horrifying that may scare you beyond your wits. And from what we know of history, most of it was not pleasant or peaceful. Here are 15 top creepy discoveries that will definitely give you the creeps. Let's start off with Number 15, Potachani. Mass graves are always unsettling, but sometimes they pose more questions than answers. In 2007, Croatian construction workers in the village of Potachani unearthed a 6,200-year-old crime scene. And the more archaeologists studied it, the stranger it became. Inside the pit were 41 skeletons, victims ranging in age from their 50s to just 2 years old. Most had been executed with blows to the back of the skull. Some had even been struck multiple times as if their killers were in a panic. In fact, the victims weren't related. Genetic analysis shows that while they mostly came from what is now Turkey, they weren't a single family or clan. This only deepened the mystery. Why were they all together? And even disturbing, none of them had defensive wounds. They didn't fight back. They didn't run. Why? Were they captives, or did they accept their fate? 6,000 years later, the questions remain unanswered, their secrets buried with them. Number 14, the Great Flood of China. For thousands of years, Chinese legend told of a deadly flood that nearly destroyed civilization, until a hero named Yu the Great tamed the waters and founded the Xia dynasty, China's first ruling dynasty. Historians dismissed it as a myth. But in 2016, archaeologists found shocking evidence that the flood really happened. A natural landslide in Qinghai province blocked the Yellow River, forming an enormous lake. When the dam finally collapsed months later, it triggered a massive flood that tore through villages for over 1,200 miles. The destruction was catastrophic. Among the ruins, archaeologists found the skeletal remains of 14 people, most of them kids, who had been crushed by the raging waters. Radiocarbon dating placed the event around 1920 BCE, exactly when Yu's mythical flood was said to have occurred. While it doesn't prove the Xia dynasty existed, it does suggest that one of China's most ancient legends might be rooted in a real disaster. Number 13, the Battle of Talins Valley. In 1996, an amateur archaeologist in northeastern Germany stumbled upon a single human arm bone in the Talins Valley. He had no idea he had just uncovered the site of the oldest known battle in European history. Over 10,000 more bones, many with signs of brutal injuries, would eventually be found, rewriting what we thought we knew about Bronze Age wars. Radiocarbon dating placed the battle in the 13th century BCE. Arrowheads were still embedded in bones, skulls had been crushed by clubs, and a thigh bone fracture suggested someone had fallen from a horse. This wasn't a small skirmish, it was a full-scale war. Excavations since 2008 have uncovered over 13,000 bone fragments, most belonging to young men. The battle likely involved thousands of soldiers, a scale previously thought impossible at that time. Until Talins, historians assumed Bronze Age societies weren't heavily militarized. Turns out, they were very, very wrong. Number 12, the Vampire Child of Lugano. A few summers ago, archaeologists digging at La Necropoli dei Bambini, a 1,500-year-old children's cemetery in Umbria, Italy, made a discovery straight out of a horror movie. Among the many small skeletons, one stood out, a 10-year-old child buried with a large rock jammed into its mouth. It was an unmistakable sign of a vampire burial, a ritual meant to prevent the dead from rising. The rock had been deliberately cemented into place, even bearing visible teeth marks. Experts believe the child likely died from malaria, a disease known to plague the region at the time. Fear of the dead returning as disease-spreading revenants wasn't uncommon, and this burial suggests the community was terrified of whatever they thought might happen next. Locals now call the child the Vampire of Lugano. Rationally, we know it's just an ancient superstition, but something about that stone-filled mouth still makes your skin crawl. Number 11. Tzompantli. For years, historians assumed the Aztec Tzompantli, massive racks of human skulls, were just Spanish propaganda, exaggerated to justify their brutal conquest. But in 2015, archaeology proved otherwise. In the heart of what was once Tenochtitlan, researchers uncovered 119 skulls, a fraction of the thousands that supposedly once lined the city. Initially, experts assumed these remains belonged to enemy warriors sacrificed to appease the gods. That theory shattered when they found skulls of women, children, and the elderly among the dead. Some of the victims' faces had been transformed into masks, their nasal passages embedded with obsidian blades, perhaps the very ones that ended their lives. Their eyes were replaced with polished white stones, eerie black dots simulating pupils. The Aztecs, ever pragmatic, demanded more sacrifices from wealthier subject states, seeing it as proof of prosperity. Meanwhile, smaller states were spared from overtaxation, lest they collapse. Even ritual slaughter had an economic strategy. Number 10. Sand Creek. Even in the long, brutal history of U.S. military violence against Native Americans, the Sand Creek Massacre stands out as one of the most horrifying. On November 29, 1864, 700 U.S. cavalry soldiers launched an unprovoked attack on a peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho settlement in Colorado. The official justification? A white settler family had been murdered near Denver, a crime the Native American community had no connection to. The soldiers, under Colonel John Chivington, slaughtered about 200 people. Chivington declared it a great victory, but Captain Silas Soule, a fellow officer, refused to stay silent. He reported the truth, exposing the massacre for what it was. The U.S. government condemned the attack, but unsurprisingly, not a single soldier was punished. By 1988, there was an effort to preserve the site of the massacre, but there was one problem. No one remembered exactly where it was. It took a combined effort from the National Park Service, Colorado state officials, and Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes to find it. Even then, the final clue was an 1868 map drawn by Lieutenant Samuel Bonsale, which had been lost to time. As it turns out, a Cheyenne spiritual leader had already blessed the location in 1978, long before anyone could prove it was the right place. Number 9. The Lloyds Bank Copraite. Most archaeological finds involve weapons, bones, or lost cities. But in 1972, during construction for a Lloyds Bank in York, archaeologists unearthed something even more unforgettable: a 7-inch long, 2-inch thick fossilized human turd. It remains the largest intact human coprolite ever discovered. This 9th century fecal relic belonged to a Viking from Jorvik, modern-day York. Analysis revealed his diet consisted mostly of bread and meat, but more disturbingly, his gut was teeming with parasites. His coprolite contained eggs from Ascaris lumbricoids and whipworms, meaning he likely suffered from severe intestinal infections. In extreme cases, these worms could tunnel through flesh and even emerge from the eyes. Lovely. Though it's just a glorified poop fossil, the Lloyds Bank coprolite is a gold mine for understanding Viking diet, health, and hygiene. The archaeologists who studied it, a niche group known as paleontologists, consider it as precious as the crown jewels. And in a way, they're not wrong. Number 8. The head of a king. Sometimes history-changing discoveries are made in pyramids or sunken ships. Other times they're found in a dusty attic. In 2008, retired French tax collector Jacques Bélanger was rummaging through his loft when he found a box inside an old wardrobe. Inside the box, a mummified human head, one that supposedly belonged to Henry IV, the 17th century king of France. Known as the Good King Henry, he was assassinated in 1610 for his efforts to promote religious tolerance. During the French Revolution, his remains were desecrated, and at some point, his head was stolen. It eventually ended up in an auction in 1919 and was forgotten in Bellinger's attic for decades. Forensic experts matched facial features and wounds to Henry IV, but DNA testing later cast doubt. The debate over its authenticity remains just unresolved. Number 7. Mutiny, murder, and mayhem on the Batavia. In 1628, the Batavia set sail from the Netherlands toward the East Indies with 341 people aboard. By June 1629, it had wrecked off Australia's Beacon Island, leaving hundreds stranded. What followed was one of history's most depraved mutinies. Second in command, Geronimus Cornelis, a former apothecary with sadistic tendencies, took control. He sent the strongest survivors on fake rescue missions, ensuring they wouldn't return. Left with women, children, and the weak, he and his followers embarked on a reign of terror, torturing, killing, and enslaving. Women were raped, and over 125 people were massacred. The ship's commander, Francisco Pelsaert, eventually returned with reinforcements, captured the mutineers, and executed them. Archaeologists are still uncovering graves on the island, revealing new horrors from the wreck of the Batavia, a ship whose story is still told as a brutal cautionary tale of power, madness, and betrayal. Number 6. Crow Creek. This massacre is a grim reminder that violence wasn't just a colonial import. Pre-Columbian America had its own bloody conflicts. In the 1950s, excavation for a dam in South Dakota uncovered a mass grave containing the remains of 486 people. The victims, men, women, and children alike, had been killed en masse in a brutal attack around 1350 AD. Many skulls bore the telltale marks of scalping, a clear sign that this wasn't just warfare, it was total annihilation. Why did this happen? The leading theory is that it was a fight for survival. The 14th century was marked by severe droughts, triggering mass migrations and conflicts over dwindling resources. Even the Pueblo tribes in the southwest abandoned entire settlements during this period. Analysis of the victims' bones showed they suffered from iron deficiency anemia, likely due to chronic malnutrition. This paints a bleak picture. Starving people were slaughtered, possibly by a rival tribe just as desperate to survive. As climate change intensifies today, Crow Creek serves as a haunting example of what happens when resources become scarce and desperation turns deadly. Number 5. Camloops, Marieville, and more. In 2021, Canada faced a horrifying reckoning with its past. The nation had long run a system of residential schools, where Indigenous children were forcibly taken from their families under the guise of education. What actually happened was closer to cultural genocide. And then, the graves started appearing. At Camloops, British Columbia, 215 unmarked child graves were discovered. At Marieville, Saskatchewan, 751 more. By January 2022, another 93 surfaced at St. Joseph's Mission. The victims, many of whom had tried to escape rampant abuse, died from disease, neglect, and worse. For decades, survivors had spoken of atrocities within these institutions. Now the earth itself testified to their suffering. The last residential school closed in 1998. Let that sink in. This isn't ancient history. It's a wound still bleeding. Over 100 more schools remain unsearched. And if these discoveries have proven anything, it's that the dead are still speaking. Number 4. Sanborg. History is full of massacres, but few betrayals were as personal as what happened in Sanborg. Around 500 AD, something super-duper terrible unfolded in this Swedish coastal fortress. Archaeologists found bodies scattered across homes, men, children, even an elderly man burned and stuffed with sheep's teeth. Infants had been cut open. The dead lay untouched for centuries, left to rot where they fell. But here's the strange part. Nothing of value was taken. Jewelry, coins, and precious ornaments remained in place. There were no signs of a siege, no defensive wounds on the bones. This wasn't an enemy raid. It was an inside job. The victims likely never saw it coming. Their own people had turned on them in what now looks like a large-scale act of betrayal. To this day, Sanborg is remembered in Swedish folklore as a cursed place. Maybe that's because some betrayals are too horrifying to be forgotten. Number 3. Guffs Cave. Cannibalism was bound to make this list, but you probably didn't expect it to take us to England. Deep inside Guffs Cave in Cheddar Gorge, archaeologists uncovered 15,000-year-old human bones, gnawed and butchered just like the animal remains beside them. This wasn't survival cannibalism, it was ritual. Skull caps were carved into drinking bowls, much like the later handiwork of real-life horror icon Ed Gein. The eerie part? The bones weren't just consumed, they were decorated. Zigzagging etchings, possibly tally marks, were carved into them. No one knows what they meant. A macabre record-keeping system? A ritualistic farewell? Whatever the reason, it's long lost to time. Oddly enough, the bones lacked signs of violent trauma, meaning the victims might have died naturally before being eaten. If that's the case, it's almost a relief. Because if they were alive when the ritual began, well, that's a thought best left in the cave. Number 2. The Forgotten Genocide. In 1931, Hitler infamously asked, "Who remembers the Armenian extermination?" But the Holocaust had another chilling predecessor, one that remained buried in the deserts of Namibia until 1999. There, archaeologists uncovered mass graves tied to a genocide most history books ignore. Between 1904 and 1908, Germany launched a brutal extermination campaign against the Herero and Nama tribes. After an anti-colonial uprising, German forces, under orders to take no prisoners, killed 80% of the Herero and 50% of the Nama. Survivors were thrown into concentration camps, where they were subjected to starvation, forced labor, and grotesque medical experiments. One of the lead scientists, Dr. Eugen Fischer, whose racial theories would later influence the Nazis. One of his subordinates, Dr. Joseph Mengele, the infamous Angel of Death. Namibia, still struggling for stability, refused to formally recognize the genocide for decades. When Germany finally acknowledged it, the $1.35 billion in reparations went mostly to infrastructure, not the victims' descendants. Number 1. 36 Craraven Street. This discovery feels like something straight out of an Assassin's Creed plotline, but the reality is even stranger. In 1997, renovations at 36 Craraven Street, a London address once home to Benjamin Franklin, uncovered a macabre secret in the basement: the skeletal remains of at least 15 people, 6 of whom were children. Stranger still, among the human bones were the remains of sea turtles. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bones dated back to the 1770s, the exact period when Franklin lived there as an envoy for the American colonies. The discovery was so shocking because at the time, renovations were underway to convert the house into a museum honoring Franklin himself. Luckily for Franklin's legacy, the truth soon came to light. The real culprit was William Hewson, an anatomist who also lived there and was involved in grave robbing, a common but illicit practice in medical research. Franklin, ever the scientist, likely knew, but chose silence. Today, the house stands as a museum, but its past lingers beneath the floorboards. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. We'll see you soon.